We're going to go over the current state and how to detect and defeat it, if possible. So the agenda is very quick review here because we don't have a ton of time. With that said, traditional malware is file-based logically, hence name, Fileless malware that has developed recently, mostly in 2017. So Fileless malware became very prevalent starting in 2014. It became much more widespread, but it goes back to 2001, and we'll get into that here in just a minute. In 2017, it got to the point where it is literally over half of all the malware out there nowadays. So if you check out the Start Reading article here on 12/21/2017, they said it was 52%. Our SOC, our Security Operations Center, that monitors things like this for our product, said it was 60%. I contacted another gentleman who I knew at another endpoint firm, and told him I was doing an ISSA presentation, so I needed the stat. He got the stat too, so we all shared it. He did a similar presentation at a different ISSA meeting. But it's over half of the malware in 2017, and most of it was really happening in Q3 and Q4. So the reason is because most Fileless malware really isn't detectable by an IOC, because Fileless malware usually operates in the command line or the PowerShell. And if you think about it, what kind of IOC am I going to get there? I mean, there's no indicator of compromise because there's no artifact left behind. And that's why the attackers have moved to this platform, because PowerShell is everywhere. And in version 3 and in version 5 of PowerShell, you can turn on auditing, but what the attackers do now is once they gain access to the system, what they do is they downgrade PowerShell version 2, which has this much auditing on it. So there are alerts you can set up for that in Windows system logs to be able to catch that, but it's usually they're going to cover the tracks in the Windows system logs too. So it's a problem. Really what catches them is the, quote, non-negotiables, what we call it. So once somebody gets into your environment, maybe via a phishing attack, or they drop a USB key in a parking lot, somebody plugs it in, and it pulls in, it drops for instance, a shell process. They try and open a spreadsheet and drops a shell process like PowerShell right into memory versus committing anything to disk. That establishes a command and control channel straight from memory via PowerShell. That's a risky behavior, but it's a good first step. And why it's a good first step is because it's a way not have any artifacts there. If somebody is stupid enough to enable a macro on an Office document, clearly they've failed security training in the past, their corporate security training, but that's one way to get into the environment. That's just one example. However they get into the environment, usually they want to launch in memory, they want to do something that never hits disk. Now, they usually quickly move from that context of PowerShell, because PowerShell doesn't normally communicate with the internet, right? So they want to usually migrate or inject themselves into a process that does. So Firefox, Chrome, IE, whatever the Edge, whatever it's called from Microsoft nowadays. And they have the ability then to establish a command and control channel over port 443, no problems, because there's a ton of 443 traffic. What's a big deal, right? A lot of times the attackers are using today to gain command and control something called a domain generation algorithm. Can somebody tell me about that? Does that SQL Slammer? SQL Slammer was unique because it was the first real fast propagating worm. This is actually a wrong stat, but this is what I was, when I researched it said, I lived through this. This infected every single Microsoft server that was alive on the internet that you could get to in less than 12 minutes, everywhere in the entire world. And of course, we were smart enough to put our SQL databases right on the internet back then with no protection. So anyway, the idea here is that the history of Fileless malware does go back quite a ways. Keeping an eye on my time here. So fast forward, I know this is 9 years and there was a lot that happened in between. But this is really what we consider a newer threat, or the newer version of Fileless malware. This is one of the first. So Palex came out in 2014. It did two things that were kind of unique and kind of cool. In the registry, that's where it resided. And it had a watchdog process in the registry. So if somebody tried to kill it, it would start back up again. It used, anytime you open a file folder, it literally would start again. So you shut off the machine, click on file folder, it would open back up. And then if somebody that was investigating the box tried to kill it, they had a watchdog process to restart it. So this is some of the more modern ways of doing things. As we go on here, 2015, now this is a variant that's out there today, still being used for ransomware, more so today than it was back in the past. But this is a screen that would pop up back in the day to try and fool you and think that it was doing something else rather than actually taking advantage of your system and trying to do lateral propagation inside the environment. So Copter is even more modern. I'm going to go ahead and get into newer Fileless malware because we don't have all the time in the world here. These are some of the newer variants. The second one down, PowerWare, is strictly a PowerShell script. And it uses the PowerShell engine. And you could write a script like this to encrypt your hard drive. Anybody could. PowerWare just happens to be easy to take the scripts from, pop them into the PowerShell command line, and encrypt the entire disk. So it's something that sysadmin can do too. Anybody can do it. Some of these other ones, we're using WMI. So we're using stuff that's in the environment. So they're living off the land. WMI and PowerShell are everywhere. And you're usually unrestricted because it's a sysadmin role. And obviously, they have to have pretty high-level access to get their job done on a set of systems. Does this all make sense to everybody? Any questions so far? Okay. And then more modern, even more modern than that. So PowerShell, with it being everywhere and not being monitored by anybody. Most security admins are not even looking at PowerShell because that's a realm of the sysadmin, right? So we trust them, and we do trust them. Probably 99.9% of the time, those guys do the right thing. If they do, probably don't do something right. It's probably a fat finger. It's not, like they're being jerks or malicious. So the attackers got smarter, and they created frameworks. Even I can use one of these frameworks to do things. I don't have to know PowerShell. Literally, like PowerShell Empire, if you guys download this, it's a menuing system. It says, for instance, I want to escalate privileges. So what it does is, I want to escalate privileges. That's one of the choices. It goes out, looks at the attacker playbook by the command and control channel. It usually goes down, looks for a vulnerability on the system. And remember, they're on the internal side of the system, so they're not going through a firewall or anything from the outside. They're already on the box. So it's looking for vulnerabilities like a vulnerability scanner would on the actual operating system itself. It finds a vulnerability that's in the playbook. Then it pulls down a script to be able to take advantage of that vulnerability. And again, a script, text, not a file, because files are easily identified by a hash or whatever it might be. And then it will escalate privileges if it finds a vulnerability that can do that on the operating system. Next, if you want to move laterally, it will usually grab something like Mimikatz to be able to dump passwords. Find out if there's maybe, when the system was created, like your gold build, sometimes gold builds have the local administrator password built in, and then everything's cloned off of that. If I can dump that password somehow, maybe not Mimikatz, but another password, more sophisticated password number, because Mimikatz usually works in the LSAS process in memory, so it's usually won't pick up the gold build thing, but another sophisticated password number, I can grab a password that's local admin and then move laterally in the environment. So I don't know if you saw the article 2 days ago that came out. It's called Time to Breakout. It's an industry stat that's come about really in 2017 for the most part. And what that is once somebody gets inside your defenses, the time to break out, on average, breaking out of that machine to go to another machine, move laterally, is average of 1 minute and 52 seconds. Our company did not create that stat. It's what other organizations found in the industry. So you don't have a whole lot of time to shut it down, is the idea. So, and PowerShell being everywhere, it's often used in all these attack frameworks. It's pretty easy to do. Metasploit's been around forever. Metasploit payloads, which are scripts nowadays, to bypass all of the normal defenses that you have. That's why they're pulled down as scripts versus files now. And of course, if you could analyze the scripts, but oftentimes the scripts are obfuscated, so that you have to be able to decode base64 encoding, XORing, other ways of scrambling the data, not encrypting it necessarily, but just encoding it to be able to dig into what the real commands were behind that. Okay, so detecting fileless malware. Obviously, IOCs don't work in this case. So some of the things you can do is monitor for scripts that like start out of an abnormal folder, like the temp folder. Look for obfuscation techniques, base64. There's several other obfuscation techniques that you can look for. Sysadmins, probably not going to obfuscate what they're doing. They're probably not going to use the with hidden modifier at the end of the PowerShell script. It's not not something they would normally do. Download string. If PowerShell is using download string, that's usually a problem because PowerShell should usually not be communicating with the internet, right? So in version 3 and version 5 of PowerShell, you can turn on auditing to be able to look for these things. But then you also want to have something that's looking for the downgrade of PowerShell, because that's the most common tactic used today. Of course, you can see some more things here, but C script and W script, if using those, which is kind of odd, because usually people who are sysadmins are pretty smart. They don't usually need C script and W script to get their job done. So, any questions so far? Okay. We're about to wrap up because I know we got like 4 minutes. All right, so more detecting persistence mechanisms. The only time they usually will hit disk at all is in the auto runs, but usually the persistence mechanisms are registry keys because you're not, obviously it's Windows only. But still, the idea here is that they have to have some way to restart or get their process restarted. Using MSHDA, that's a really strange one. PowerShell, sysadmins almost never use that. And if they're using what's called invoked expressions. So if you're on PowerShell command line and you're using like an interpreter from Metasploit, you almost always have to type in invoke blah, invoke immunicats, invoke whatever it might be. So if you just monitor for that in the audit, that's something your admins are probably never going to be doing. And if they are, well then maybe you can change that. Or whitelisted or whatever, you know what I'm saying. With that said, one of the things that's a problem is if PowerShell is loaded directly by the DLL, which actually is done in memory. With that done, it's very hard to find that, so it's very good at hiding its existence from detection. There are a couple tools out there that can do that. We're one of them. There are other ones, but the idea here is that's a way that you can start PowerShell via the DLL only. It doesn't show up in the process list at all. If you're admin on the box or system on the box, it doesn't show up. Okay, so just real quick on PowerShell, why is everybody currently using PowerShell? Because nobody's monitoring. It's everywhere. It can be downgraded easily. Usually there's no audit turned on to see a downgrade in PowerShell. Your sysadmins don't notice it because it still has the same functionality, still executes your commands just like it would before, so it's not a big deal. Of course, it can execute payloads directly from memory, even though it is being run from the disk, or it can be literally started in memory, so it's not detectable. No IOCs. Very few artifacts, as we talked about, and traffic is encrypted between boxes with PowerShell by default. I'm not saying you can't turn that off, but who wants to unencrypt data, right? So with that said, it's very easy to obfuscate scripts, get through your current defenses like malware sandboxes or IDS signatures or whatever the heck it is, traditional AV, because it's not really a file. Oh yeah, you can bypass some whitelisting tools depending on configuration. We talked about sandboxes, overlooked by security professionals, we talked about that. And then of course there's these frameworks that are popping up that make it easy to use. And this is a US CERT article, so it's publicly available, you guys can go Google this. But the idea here is, and there's several out on SANS, there's a few on US CERT about this, is that it's a tradecraft, the adversary tradecraft. since very few IOCs are being left behind, and when the IOCs are being used, they have a very short lifespan. As we know, IOCs are usually never reused by APT groups because, of course, they don't want to be identified, no attribution, that type of thing. And also, the lifespan of threat intelligence, unless it's very broad and very timely, is going down lower and lower. So TTPs, or tactics, techniques, and procedures, are really detecting the adversary tradecraft or behaviors. This seems to be the current way of detecting people. So just real quick, what we do very quickly is we are in the middle, post-penetration, pre-damage. A lot of the security spend is done here and here, but anything in here, these non-negotiable steps an attacker has to go through, is where we live. So we can suspend ransomware process before it does any encrypting of files, because there's behavior that's associated with almost all ransomware, and it's to start someplace on the index disk and start at the other end, maybe start in the middle. There's different behaviors, and if you know those behaviors, you can automatically detect that with certain things placed on the hard drive, and that's what we do there. So all of these things, everything we do is behavior-based or TTP-based. We don't do almost anything threat intel-based, except for the most common, low-hanging fruit type of things via threat intel. Anyway, that's it. We are out of time.
I have one comment.
Yes, sir.
Your list of frameworks,
Yeah.
those are created by security professionals, not malicious actors.
Yeah.
Okay, I say malicious actors. Those
Oh, did
are
I?
all security professionals.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was thrown on here to do a
No, that's fine. I
presentation.
just want to make sure everybody understands that.
Sure.
Those are created for the community to secure their systems.
Yeah.
And if malicious actors use them on the side,
Yep.
those are created for us to secure our systems.
Yep. Okay. Anyway, I know you guys have another session here to go to, so I'll let you roll. Any questions? Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thanks.